The siren's blare cut through the pre-dawn silence like a sharp blade. My heart pounded as I saw the blue and red lights reflecting in my rearview mirror. I'd been driving along Montevideo's Rambla for only 20 minutes, trying to unwind after another exhausting day creating logos for demanding clients. The speed? Well, maybe I was going a bit over the limit, but I never imagined that a simple traffic ticket would become the moment that would divide my life into before and after. Subscribe to the channel and leave a like to get access to more stories like this. I pulled over, my hands shaking slightly as I fumbled for my documents and my wallet. The fine October rain created a halo around the streetlights, transforming the city into something almost cinematic. At 26, I considered myself someone who knew life well. A freelance graphic designer, newly arrived in Uruguay for a long-term project, independent and career-focused. My dating life had always been simple. A few casual girlfriends, nothing too serious, nothing too complicated. Footsteps approached the side of my car. I took a deep breath and rolled down the window, preparing for the standard conversation about speeding. But when I looked up, all the words I had rehearsed simply evaporated. The police officer who leaned down to speak to me was not what I expected. Tall, with broad shoulders that perfectly filled his navy blue uniform, and brown hair trimmed with military precision. But it was his eyes that completely undid me. They were as green as the ocean on a stormy day, with an intensity that seemed to see right through me. A small scar crossed his left eyebrow, giving a mysterious air to a face that could have been on the cover of any magazine. "Good evening. Documents, please." His voice had an accent I couldn't quite place, a mix of Spanish with something more, maybe English. What you hear here is just the beginning. The full stories, unfiltered, and with all the details you can imagine, are available now. Check out the link in the description right now. I handed over the papers, our fingers brushing briefly during the exchange. It was like receiving a gentle electric shock. He examined my Brazilian driver's license with excessive attention, and I took the opportunity to get a better look at him. The name tag on his chest read, D. Campbell, Derek Campbell. Even the name sounded different. Austin Parker, graphic designer. He read aloud, pronouncing my name in a way that made my stomach flutter. "Do you know why I pulled you over?" "Speeding?" I replied, trying to sound casual, but my voice came out hoarser than normal. He nodded, but didn't move away from the car as expected. Instead, he leaned in a little closer, and I could smell his cologne mixed with something masculine and warm. 85 in a 60 zone. It's dangerous on a rainy night like this. "You're right. My apologies. I was trying to unwind after work. Driving sometimes calms me down." Derek studied me for a moment that felt like an eternity. There was something in his gaze that went beyond the standard professional demeanor. A curiosity, maybe even interest. "New in town?" "I got here 2 months ago. Still getting used to it." "And how's the experience been?" The question surprised me. Cops didn't usually get interested in the personal lives of offenders. "Good. Different. Montevideo has a unique energy, especially at night." He smiled, and it was as if someone had flicked on a light switch. "I agree. This city reveals its secrets to those who know how to look." He paused. "You seem tired. Maybe you should grab a coffee before you keep driving. Do you have a place you recommend?" "There's a gas station on the corner of Boulevard Artigas. It's open all night. Strong coffee, perfect for waking you up." Something about the way he said it made it sound more like an invitation than a suggestion. "What about you? Are you also stopping for coffee?" Derek hesitated, looking around as if checking something, then returned his attention to me. "My shift ends in 15 minutes. If you want, I can show you the best coffee in the area." My heart sped up again, but this time it wasn't because of the ticket. "That'd be great." He scribbled something on the back of the ticket before handing it to me. "I'll just give you a warning this time. But be more careful, okay?" As I took the paper, he held my hand for a second longer than necessary. "I'll meet you at the station in 20 minutes." I nodded, unable to form words. Derek tapped the car roof lightly and walked away. As I watched him head back to his patrol car, I noticed how the uniform fit his athletic body perfectly. There was something hypnotic about the way he moved, confident, but not arrogant. I drove to the gas station trying to understand what had just happened. In 8 years of adulthood, I had never felt such an immediate and intense attraction to anyone, and never, at any point, to another man. My experience with relationships had always been heterosexual, without question, without doubt. But now, waiting for Derek in the dimly lit parking lot of a Uruguayan gas station, I felt as if I was about to discover something fundamental about myself. If you've ever had an experience that completely changed your perception of yourself, leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more true stories like this. Derek arrived exactly on time, now wearing dark jeans and a gray t-shirt that highlighted his muscles. Without the uniform, he looked younger, more approachable. We walked into the gas station convenience store together, a simple place with formica tables and a counter where a sleepy attendant served us 2 steaming black coffees. So, graphic designer. Derek settled into the chair across from me. What kind of work do you do? Visual identity mostly. Logos, graphic materials for companies. I came here because I got a long-term project with a tech startup. They wanted someone with an international perspective. Interesting. It must be rewarding to create something from scratch, to give form to an idea. That's exactly it. What about you? Did you always want to be a cop? Derek stirred the sugar in his coffee with slow, thoughtful movements. Not really. I studied business administration in college, but let's just say life had other plans. I joined the police force 8 years ago and discovered that I liked the sense of order, of protecting people. And were you born here in Montevideo? No. I came from the United States when I was 22. My dad is Uruguayan. My mom is American. I grew up between 2 worlds. That's why the weird accent. He smiled, and I again felt that tightening in my stomach. What about you? From all over Brazil? Or a specific state? São Paulo. Big city. Fast-paced life. I came here looking for a different, more relaxed pace. And it's been working until tonight. Derek raised an eyebrow. Was tonight stressful? Not exactly stressful. More like unexpected. Our eyes met and held for a few seconds. There was a tension in the air that neither of us could name. Derek had eyes that seemed to hold secrets, and I found myself wanting to know every single one of them. Tell me about Montevideo, I asked, trying to break the intense moment. What does a tourist not see? It depends on what you're looking for. If you like art, there are hidden galleries in the Ciudad Vieja that few people know about. If you prefer nature, the deserted beaches to the east are perfect for reflection. If you're looking for nightlife, well, there are places only locals go. And you? Do you go to those places? Sometimes, when I need to escape the routine. He paused. Working at night gives you a different perspective on the city. You see people when they think no one is looking. That's when they're most true. And what did you see in me tonight? The question came out more direct than I intended. Derek studied me for a moment, as if he was deciding how much honesty he could share. I saw someone who's looking for something. I don't know what, but there's a restlessness in you. Like you're on the verge of discovering something important about yourself. His words hit me like a punch to the gut. It was as if he had read my soul in just a few minutes of conversation. Do you always do psychological analyses of people you pull over? Only the interesting ones. The next 2 hours passed like minutes. We talked about music. We discovered a shared passion for 90s alternative rock. About travel. We both dreamed of visiting Patagonia. About books. He was a voracious reader of science fiction. I preferred biographies of famous designers. Small connections that accumulated, creating a solid foundation of affinity. Derek had a way of speaking that completely held my attention. He'd gesture with his hands when he got excited about a topic, and I'd find myself watching the way his fingers moved. There was something hypnotic about his presence, a masculinity that didn't impose itself, but simply existed. I need to go, he finally said, looking at his watch. I have an early shift tomorrow. We walked together to our cars in the parking lot. The rain had stopped, leaving the asphalt shiny under the yellow lights. Derek stopped beside his black Honda Civic, his hands in his pockets. It was unexpectedly good to meet you, Austin. You too. We stood there, clearly reluctant to end the night. There was something unspoken hanging between us, a question neither of us had the courage to ask. Maybe we could do this again. The coffee, I mean. Derek pulled his phone out of his pocket. If you want. We exchanged numbers. When our fingers touched during the handoff, I felt that electric current again. Derek seemed to feel it too because he hesitated before putting his phone away. Austin? Yeah? Drive safe. It wasn't just about speeding, and we both knew it. Over the next few days, Derek and I kept in touch through messages. Conversations that started casual and stretched on for hours. He recommended places in the city. I shared stories about my design projects. Gradually, our interactions became more frequent, more intimate. Derek had a unique perspective on urban life. As a night patrol officer, he knew Montevideo in a way that few others did. He told me about the different tribes that emerged after midnight. The night shift workers, the insomniacs walking the Ramblas, the artists who found inspiration in the quiet of the early morning. We started meeting regularly, always in public places, always with casual excuses. A coffee after his shift, lunch on the weekend, a walk through the Ciudad Vieja. Each meeting deepened our connection in a way I couldn't explain. Derek was different from anyone I had ever met. There was a quiet intensity about him, like deep water that seems calm on the surface but hides powerful currents underneath. When he talked about his work, he showed a genuine passion for justice and protection. When we laughed together, his entire face transformed, revealing a youthfulness that work and responsibilities kept hidden. I'd catch myself thinking about him at random moments throughout the day. While working on a logo, my mind would drift to our last conversation. At night, before falling asleep, I'd revisit every detail of our meetings. It was a gentle obsession, but undeniable. What confused me was the nature of this attraction. It wasn't just admiration or friendship. There was something deeper, more physical. When Derek gestured during our conversations, I'd find myself watching his hands and imagining what it would be like to feel them. When he smiled, my stomach would clench in a way that had nothing to do with ordinary nervousness. 3 weeks after our first meeting, Derek showed up at the cafe where I usually worked in the afternoons. We hadn't planned to meet, but he said he was in the area and decided to stop for a quick coffee. "How's the startup project going?" he asked, settling into the chair across from my table cluttered with sketches and notes. "Complicated. The client changed their mind about the visual direction 3 times this week. Sometimes I think they don't know exactly what they want." "Welcome to the real world," Derek laughed. "In the police force we also deal with situations that are constantly changing. The key is to stay focused on the final objective, even when the path changes." I watched the way he spoke, the natural confidence in his posture, the way his eyes would lock onto mine when he wanted to emphasize a point. There was something magnetic about Derek that went beyond his physical appearance, although that certainly didn't go unnoticed. "Derek," I said, closing my laptop, "can I ask you a personal question?" "Sure. Do you have a girlfriend, or someone special?" He hesitated, stirring his coffee with the spoon. "No. My job doesn't make long-lasting relationships easy. Irregular shifts, stress, the burden of dealing with the darker side of society. Most people don't understand. And has anyone ever understood? There have been a few attempts, but nothing that really worked." He looked directly at me. "What about you? Nothing serious in the last 2 years? Since I decided to focus on my career, my personal life has kind of taken a back seat. Don't you miss it? Relationships? Sometimes. But I've learned that it's better to be alone than to be with the wrong person, just to not be lonely." Derek nodded, understanding. Wisdom that takes time to acquire. We spent another hour talking about relationships, expectations, past disappointments. It was the kind of conversation that normally only happens between intimate friends, but with Derek, it flowed naturally. He had a way of listening that made me feel truly heard, understood. When he stood up to leave, Derek put his hand on my shoulder for a moment. "Thanks for the conversation, Austin. Sometimes it's good to talk about these things with someone who gets it." The touch lasted only a few seconds, but it was enough to send waves of warmth through my body. When he walked away, I felt an immediate lack of that physical connection. That night, alone in my apartment, I admitted to myself something I had been avoiding for weeks. I was developing feelings for Derek that went far beyond friendship, feelings that questioned everything I thought I knew about my sexuality. It was unknown territory, scary and exciting at the same time. At 26, discovering a completely new facet of myself was disconcerting, but at the same time, it explained the intensity of our connection, the way my body reacted to his presence. The problem was I had no idea if Derek felt something similar. He was friendly, attentive, but that could just be his natural personality. Reading signals in a situation like this seemed impossible. 2 days later, Derek called me to meet him at a bar in the port area. He said he wanted to show me a special place, away from the tourist crowds. When I arrived, he was already waiting, wearing dark jeans and a blue shirt that made his eyes stand out. The bar was small, frequented mostly by locals. Quiet music, soft lighting, a perfect atmosphere for intimate conversations. Derek had chosen a table in the corner, partially hidden from the others. "This place is amazing," I commented, looking at the old photographs of Montevideo that decorated the walls. "How did you find it?" "A colleague brought me here years ago. Since then, it's become my refuge when I need to think, or when I want to talk to someone important without interruptions." The word important hung between us. Derek ordered 2 local craft beers, and we started talking about our days. But there was something different about this night, a tension that wasn't present in our previous meetings. "Austin," Derek said after we finished the first round, "can I be honest with you about something?" My heart sped up. Of course. Since we met, I've been thinking a lot about connections, about how certain people come into our lives and change our perspective on ourselves. I swallowed hard. "What kind of change?" Derek stared fixedly at his hands for a moment, as if he was gathering courage. "The kind that makes you question things you've always considered certain, that makes you realize that maybe you didn't know yourself as well as you thought." My heart was beating so hard I was sure Derek could hear it. "I understand perfectly." Our eyes met and held. In that moment, without words, we recognized that we were facing the same confusion, the same questions. "This is new for me," Derek admitted in a low voice. "Completely new." "Me too. And it scares me a little." "Me too." But neither of us got up from the table. Instead, we continued talking, cautiously exploring this unknown emotional territory. Derek told me about his childhood split between two countries, about the pressure to live up to expectations in a traditionally conservative profession. I shared my fears about accepting fundamental changes in the way I saw myself. When we left the bar, it was already past midnight. We walked slowly to our cars, neither of us wanting to end the night. The air was cool, carrying the scent of the nearby ocean. "Austin," Derek stopped beside my car. "Would you like to continue this conversation somewhere more private?" The question carried a weight that we both understood. It wasn't just about conversation. "My apartment is 10 minutes from here." Derek nodded. "I'll follow you." During the drive to my building, my mind raced between nervousness and anticipation. I was about to cross a line that, once crossed, would change everything. But I also knew I had passed the point of no return a long time ago. We went up to my apartment in silence, only the sound of our footsteps echoing in the stairwell. My hand trembled slightly as I unlocked the door, and Derek noticed, placing his hand over mine to calm me down. The simple touch sent an electric current up my arm. "Are you sure about this?" he asked softly, his green eyes studying me with intensity. "I've never been so sure of something that terrifies me so much," I replied, opening the door. My apartment was lit only by the city light coming through the large windows. I didn't turn on the lights. There was something about that golden twilight that made the moment more intimate, more real. Derek walked to the window, looking at the partial view of the Rio de la Plata, his hands in the back pockets of his jeans. "Nice view," he commented, but his voice was tense. "Derek." I approached slowly, my heart beating like a drum. "You don't have to pretend you're admiring the scenery." He turned to face me, and I saw my own nervousness reflected in his eyes. "Sorry, it's just, this is completely new for me. I don't really know how to proceed." "It's new for me too. Maybe we can figure it out together." Derek took one step toward me, then another, until we were just a few inches apart. I could feel the heat radiating from his body, the scent of his cologne mixed with something masculine and warm that was uniquely his. "Austin," he murmured, raising a hand to touch my face. "Can I couldn't form words. I just nodded. When his fingers brushed my cheek, I instinctively closed my eyes. It was a gentle, almost reverent touch, as if he were memorizing every detail. "Your eyes are incredible," he whispered. "Since that first night, I can't stop thinking about them." I opened my eyes and found his fixed on mine. "Derek, Shh." He placed his thumb over my lips. "We don't have to talk right now." The distance between us gradually disappeared. Derek tilted his head, bringing his face closer to mine with a slowness that was driving me crazy. I could feel his warm breath against my skin, see every detail of his green eyes, the small scar on his eyebrow that made him even more interesting. When our lips finally touched, it was as if a switch had been flipped in my brain. The kiss started hesitant, a question being asked and answered simultaneously. But when I felt Derek's sigh against my mouth, all restraint disappeared. My hands found their way to his waist, pulling him closer. Derek responded by pressing his body against mine, his hands tangling in my hair. The kiss deepened, tongues meeting in an urgent exploration that spoke of weeks of accumulated tension. Derek tasted of beer and something indefinably masculine. His lips were softer than I had imagined, but his kiss had an intensity that made me dizzy. When we finally broke apart to breathe, we were both gasping. "Wow," I murmured, resting my forehead against his. "That's exactly what I was thinking," he replied, a small smile curving his lips. We stayed like that for a moment, just breathing together. processing what had just happened. Derek's hands were still in my hair, and I could feel every spot where our bodies touched. "Want to sit down?" I offered, gesturing to the couch. Derek nodded, but when we settled in, he stayed closer than would be considered casual. Our conversation resumed, but now there was an undercurrent of sexual tension that couldn't be ignored. Each glance lasted a little longer. Each accidental touch of hands sent sparks flying. "Tell me about your first time," Derek said suddenly, questioning these feelings. "Honestly, it was the moment you leaned down to ask for my documents. Something in me just woke up." I paused, gathering courage. "And you?" "Same night, when you smiled and asked about places for coffee. I thought, I need to spend more time with this guy, but I couldn't understand why." Derek laughed softly. "I spent weeks trying to rationalize it. And now? Now I'm tired of rationalizing." He leaned in again, this time with more confidence. Our second kiss was different from the first, more urgent, more desperate. Derek pulled me closer, his hands exploring my chest over my t-shirt. When his fingers found the hem of my shirt and touched the skin of my abdomen, I gasped against his mouth. "Is this okay?" he asked, stopping immediately. "More than okay," I replied, pulling my own t-shirt over my head. Derek's eyes widened slightly at the sight of my bare torso. His hands moved slowly, exploring every contour, as if discovering a new continent. When his fingers traced a line from my chest to my abdomen, my whole body tensed with pleasure. "You're beautiful," he murmured, his voice hoarse with desire. My hands found the buttons of his shirt, undoing them with trembling fingers. When I finally got it completely open, it was my turn to be impressed. Derek had the body of someone who took care of himself, defined muscles without being over the top, a line of dark hair running down his chest until it disappeared into his jeans. "Now who's beautiful?" I countered, my hands exploring the expanse of his chest. Derek closed his eyes, tilting his head back as my fingers mapped his skin. When I found one of his nipples and touched it lightly, he moaned softly, a sound that sent waves of heat directly to my groin. "Austin," he breathed my name like a prayer. Our mouths met again, this time without hesitation. Derek pulled me on top of him, and I settled between his legs, our bodies aligning perfectly. I could feel his erection pressing against mine through our pants, and the sensation made me almost delirious. Derek rolled, putting me under him on the sofa. His lips left my mouth to explore my neck, finding sensitive spots I didn't even know existed. When he bit lightly at the spot where my neck met my shoulder, I gasped loudly, my hands grabbing onto his shoulders. "Did you like that?" he asked against my skin, his voice charged with masculine satisfaction. Was all I could manage to emit as he repeated the motion. Derek's hands moved down, tracing the outline of my abdominal muscles before pausing at the waistband of my pants. He lifted his head to look at me, a silent question in his eyes. "Yes," I whispered before he could ask. Derek unbuttoned my pants with precise movements, pulling them down along with my underwear. The cool air of the apartment touched my exposed skin, but Derek's hungry gaze quickly warmed everything up again. "My God," he murmured, his hands tracing paths of fire across my skin. When Derek leaned down to kiss my abdomen, I thought I was going to explode. His lips were hot and soft, leaving a trail of kisses that descended lower and lower. My breathing became irregular, my whole body tense with anticipation. "Derek, I'm going to—" I tried to warn him, but he just intensified his movements. When the climax came, it was like being struck by lightning. My entire body contracted, waves of pleasure coursing through me in a way I had never experienced before. Derek didn't stop until every spasm had passed. Then he slowly moved up to lie beside me. "That was—" I began, but couldn't find the words. "Incredible," Derek completed, pulling me into his arms. We lay there in silence for a few minutes, my body still trembling slightly with the last vestiges of the orgasm. Derek was tracing lazy patterns on my chest, and I could feel his erection still pressed against my thigh. "Your turn," I murmured, starting to move down. Derek held me by the shoulders. "You don't have to. Tonight was about you." "I want to," I insisted, meeting his eyes. "I need to." Something in my voice must have convinced him, because he relaxed and let me continue. When I began to explore his body in the same way he had explored mine, Derek transformed. The controlled, confident man I knew dissolved, replaced by someone vulnerable and needy. His reactions to every touch, every kiss, were intense and genuine. When I finally took his erection into my mouth, Derek gasped loudly, his hands grabbing the couch cushions. "Austin, my God," he moaned, his voice breaking with pleasure. I was experimenting, learning what made him react, memorizing every sound he made. When I found a rhythm that left him trembling, I maintained exactly that intensity until he reached his limit. "I'm going to come," he warned, trying to pull away. But I didn't stop, wanting to give him the same intense pleasure he had given me. When Derek climaxed, it was with a husky groan that echoed through the apartment. His whole body contracted, and I continued until he pulled me up, panting and trembling. "Wow," he murmured, pulling me into his arms. "That was incredible," I finished, using his own words. Derek laughed, a low, satisfied sound. "Exactly." We lay there on the couch, our bodies sticky with sweat, our breaths gradually returning to normal. The reality of what we had done began to sink in, but instead of regret, I felt only a profound sense of completeness. "What are you thinking about?" Derek asked, noticing my thoughtful expression. "How this changes everything," I replied honestly, "and how I don't regret it one bit." "Me neither." Derek kissed my forehead. "In fact, I'm thinking about how long it took me to admit what I felt." "Fear," I replied simply. "Fear of the unknown, of changing, of accepting something about ourselves that we didn't understand. And now?" I looked at him, seeing the man who had awakened me to a part of myself I didn't even know existed. "Now, I'm afraid of different things, like protecting what we found, like dealing with the outside world that might not understand." Derek's expression turned serious. "The outside world can be complicated, especially in my profession. But here, between us, this is real. It's ours." "It's ours," I agreed. And as I said those words, I felt as if I were making a promise. Derek pulled me closer, and I closed my eyes, feeling safer and more whole than I had ever felt in my life. Whatever the future held, we knew there was something special between us, something worth any challenge we might face. The apartment was silent except for our synchronized breaths. Outside, Montevideo continued its nightlife, but inside, in our small private world, we had discovered something that would change our lives forever. I woke up with the feeling of strong arms around me. For a moment, confused between sleep and wakefulness, I thought I was dreaming. But when I opened my eyes and saw Derek sleeping peacefully beside me, it all came back in a wave. The kisses, the pleasure, the complete discovery of a part of me I didn't even know existed. Derek looked younger sleeping. The lines of tension that normally marked his face relaxed. The soft morning light came through the windows, creating golden patterns on his bare skin. For a few precious minutes I just watched, memorizing every detail of that perfect moment. "Good morning," Derek murmured without opening his eyes, a small smile curving his lips. "Good morning. How long have you been awake?" "Long enough to think." He opened his eyes and looked at me, about how everything changed in a single night. "Regrets?" "Never." Derek leaned in and gave me a soft kiss. "What about you?" "I'm more scared than regretful. But it's a good kind of fear, if that makes sense." "It makes perfect sense." Derek sat up on the makeshift bed we had made on the couch. "Austin, I need to be honest about something." My stomach clenched. "What is it?" "My situation at work is complicated. There are things from my past that could affect any relationship I have." I sat up too, pulling a sheet to cover my chest. "What kind of things?" Derek ran a hand through his hair, clearly uncomfortable. 2 years ago, I got involved with my supervisor, Sergeant Rodriguez. It was something that happened during a difficult period in my life, and I was vulnerable. He took advantage of the situation. Took advantage how? Rodriguez is married, has kids. To him, I was just a distraction, something exciting and forbidden. But to me, well, it was my first real experience with another man, and I thought it meant something. Derek paused, his eyes fixed on some distant point. When I tried to turn it into something more serious, he told me clearly that it would never be anything more than casual sex, that if I told anyone, he would destroy my career. "Derek," I began, but he raised his hand. "It didn't end there. Since then, Rodriguez has used what happened between us as a form of control. He keeps me working the worst shifts, he prevents me from progressing in my career, and he always reminds me that he has power over me." I felt a mix of anger and protectiveness rise in my chest. That's blackmail. It's exactly what it is. And that's why I've never been able to get seriously involved with anyone since then. Rodriguez makes it clear he's always watching, always ready to interfere. And now? Derek looked at me with an intensity that cut me in half. Now I've found something worth fighting for. Someone worth risking everything for. Before I could answer, Derek's phone rang. He looked at the screen and his face hardened. "Rodriguez," he murmured. "I need to take this. Campbell here." His voice completely transformed, returning to a professional and cold tone. I could only hear one side of the conversation, but Rodriguez's tone was clearly aggressive. Derek replied with monosyllables. "Yes, sir. No, sir. Understood." When he hung up, Derek was visibly tense. "Problem. He wants to see me in an hour. He said he has personal matters to discuss." Derek began to get dressed quickly. "Damn, how could he know about anything?" "Maybe it's your paranoia," I suggested. But even as I spoke, I felt a bad feeling in my stomach. Derek finished getting dressed and approached me. "Austin, if something happens—" "Nothing's going to happen," I interrupted him. "And even if it does, we'll deal with it together." He kissed me with an urgency that spoke of fear and determination mixed. "I'll call you as soon as I can." After Derek left, I stayed in the apartment trying to process everything that had happened. In less than 24 hours, I had discovered a completely new part of myself, gotten intimately involved with a man for the first time in my life, and now faced the possibility that external forces would try to destroy something that had barely begun. The phone rang 3 hours later. Derek was clearly nervous. "Can you meet me at the cafe on Calle Mercedes in 20 minutes? It's important." When I arrived, Derek was already sitting at a back table, looking around nervously. But he wasn't alone. An older man in an impeccable military uniform was sitting across from him. Even from a distance, I recognized the authoritarian posture. Definitely Rodriguez. I approached hesitantly, not knowing whether I should interrupt or wait. Derek saw me and made a discreet signal for me to join them. "Austin Parker, I presume," Rodriguez said as I sat down. His voice was smooth, but there was a coldness that gave me chills. "I'm Sergeant Rodriguez, Officer Campbell's supervisor. Pleased to meet you," I lied, shaking his offered hand. "The pleasure is mine. Derek has told me so much about you." Rodriguez's smile didn't reach his eyes. "In fact, we were just discussing Officer Campbell's career future. It seems that some distractions might be affecting his professional performance." Derek was rigid in his chair, his fists clenched on the table. "Sergeant, as we discussed?" "Ah, yes. As we discussed." Rodriguez leaned back, clearly enjoying Derek's discomfort. "You see, Mr. Parker, working in law enforcement requires a certain type of person. Discipline, focus, traditional values. When those qualities are compromised, well, that can be problematic." "I don't see how Derek's personal life affects his work," I replied, trying to keep my voice calm despite the growing anger. "Ah, but it does. Especially when certain information about Officer Campbell's past might become public. It would be a shame if his reputation were stained by previous indiscretions." The threat was clear. Derek was pale, clearly reliving the trauma from 2 years ago. "What do you want?" I asked directly. Rodriguez smiled, and it was like seeing a predator showing his teeth. "I want Campbell to focus on his career. No distractions. No unnecessary complications. And if he doesn't agree, well, then maybe it's time to reevaluate whether he has the right kind of character to serve in the police force. It would be a shame to have to initiate an investigation into improper conduct." The silence stretched for long seconds. Derek was clearly fighting an internal battle, the fear of losing his career against the desire to be free to live his life. Finally, Derek raised his head and looked Rodriguez in the eyes. "You know what, Sergeant? I'm tired." "Tired of what, Campbell?" "Tired of living in fear. Tired of letting you control my life. Tired of hiding who I am." Derek stood up, his voice growing in confidence. "Do whatever you want. Start your investigation. Tell whoever you want about our past. But I won't let you use it against me anymore." Rodriguez seemed genuinely surprised. "Campbell, think carefully about what you're saying." "I am thinking. And for the first time in 2 years, I'm thinking clearly." Derek looked at me, then back at Rodriguez. "I found something real, something worth protecting. And I won't let your fear and prejudice destroy it. You're making a terrible mistake." Rodriguez also stood up, his mask of cordiality finally falling away. "I'll make sure you regret this. Maybe, but at least I'll regret it while being honest about who I am." Rodriguez left the cafe without another word, leaving Derek and me alone with the weight of what had just happened. "Derek," I started, but he interrupted me. "I don't regret it. I'm terrified, but I don't regret it. What happens now? Now we face the consequences. Together." The following months were difficult. Rodriguez followed through on his threats, initiating an investigation into Derek. There were hearings, depositions, moments when I thought we were going to lose everything. But Derek kept his word. He faced it all with his head held high, never denying who he was or what we felt for each other. The investigation ended up not finding any evidence of improper conduct. In fact, it revealed a pattern of harassment on Rodriguez's part that led to his own dismissal. Derek was transferred to a new division, with a supervisor who cared more about competence than personal life. 6 months after our first night together, we went back to the same gas station where we had had coffee for the first time. Derek was different, more relaxed, more genuinely happy than I had ever seen him. "You know what's funny?" he said, stirring sugar in his coffee. "I spent so long being afraid of losing my career that I almost lost something much more important." "What's that?" "The chance to be happy, to be myself, to love someone who loves me back." I smiled, feeling that familiar tightening in my chest whenever Derek talked about love. It was still strange sometimes, explaining to friends and family about this fundamental change in my life. But every day it got easier, more natural. "Austin?" "Yes?" "Thank you." "For what?" "For having courage when I didn't. For staying when it would have been easier to run away. For helping me discover who I really am." I reached across the table and intertwined my fingers with his. "Thank you for pulling me over that night. For having the courage to invite me for coffee. For changing my life completely." Derek laughed, squeezing my hand. "I think we changed each other's lives." "Yeah, we did." I looked around the gas station, remembering how lost and confused I felt that first night. Now, 6 months later, sitting there with the man I loved, I finally understood what people meant when they talked about finding their soulmate. "Want to know something?" I said to Derek. "If I could go back in time to that night on the Rambla, I'd do everything exactly the same. Even knowing about all the problems we'd face? Especially knowing that. Because it was worth every difficult moment to get here." Derek brought my hand to his lips and kissed my knuckles. "I love you, Austin Parker. I love you too, Derek Campbell. Some people spend their whole lives looking for someone who completes them, who makes them question everything they thought they knew about themselves, who inspires them to be braver than they ever imagined possible. I was lucky enough to find all of that in a man in a uniform on a rainy October night. Life teaches us that true love doesn't always come in the way we expect. Sometimes it arrives disguised as a traffic ticket, a casual conversation, a look that lasts a second longer than it should. The important thing is not where it comes from, but having the courage to recognize it when it appears. What you hear here is just the beginning. The full stories, unfiltered, and with all the details you can imagine, are available now. Check out the link in the description right now. If this story touched you in some way, if you believe in the power of true love to transform lives, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell. In the comments, tell us, have you ever had the courage to live your truth even when it seemed impossible? The next true story will be even more impactful. Don't miss it. And remember, true love is always worth fighting for, no matter how scary it may seem at first.